Now to my interview with Senate Republican leader John Thune. I began the conversation, again, we recorded this late yesterday, as somebody who has served in the House and now in the Senate, and now the Senate leader with a 3-seat majority. Is this one different from past shutdowns?
You know, I would say, Steve, that it seems like so much of this, the politics around it is, I think, largely different. And, obviously, my view here, of course, is that the Democrats are under enormous amount of pressure from their hard left, and they've got this big rally in town this weekend. And, they're just demanding that they fight, no matter what the issue is, the president on pretty much every, whatever comes up in the Senate these days. Nothing is, nothing has it's been in the past in terms of moving legislation, moving executive branch nominations. Everything is much harder than it used to be, and I think part of it is it's just it's the politics of the moment. And but regrettably, we're in a situation right now where a lot of federal workers aren't getting paid, and the way to change that is to open up the government. We'll give the Democrats more opportunities to do that, but we've had now 10 votes on a clean, nonpartisan, short-term CR to fund the government, and we picked off, I think, 3 Democrats at this point, but we need about 5 more to get the government opened up again.
And yet nothing has budged over the last 2+ weeks, some indicating that this could be a new record in terms of government shutdowns. The last one was 35 days. What is your sense in terms of the timeline, what we could potentially be looking at now in the middle of October?
Well, I think my hope is certainly it doesn't last that long. I mean, that's not something to be proud of, that this, no shutdown, nobody wins. I've said that before, and that used to be a view that was held by our colleagues on the other side, by the Democrats. But it seems, at least now, that there is again, and partly I think around this big event this weekend here in Washington with all the left-wing activist groups coming to town, a real sense that they needed to not do anything until that rally was over. And even then, I mean, they're just under a tremendous amount of pressure just to resist and fight. And I think at this point, even the simple things that normally, like we just tried to get on the defense appropriations bill, which should be legislation that in most years gets 80+ votes in the Senate, and the Democrats blocked even proceeding to it. So we're in a different place. It's regrettable. Certainly hope it doesn't last 35 days, but it's going to mean that a handful of folks on the other side have to come to their senses. We have a bill that's sitting at the desk in the Senate. You've covered this place long enough to know that we could pick that up today, pass it, send it to the president. He would sign it into law, and the government would open up again. So for now, at least, we need 5 more Democrats. We're at 55 votes in the Senate, and 5 more Democrats give us the requisite 60 to open up the government.
And of course, that is the filibuster. We've seen some changes when it comes to Supreme Court nominees, judicial nominees, cabinet appointments. Do you have any sense that the filibuster could go away to give you the majority to pass this bill?
No, I'm not. I've made it very clear consistently over time. I think that'd be a really bad idea. I don't think that serves the Senate or the country well. I think the Senate was designed by the founders to be a place where things are slowed down and require some level of bipartisanship, and where a minority in the country has a voice in our lawmaking process. And so that's not an option, but it doesn't have to be. It's really simply just getting, what I think are going to be 5 courageous Democrats who have enough backbone to take on their leadership. And right now, that's really all it would take. They've got other things they want to talk about, and I've made it abundantly clear that we can have those conversations and a path forward and even a vote on things they want to vote on. But it can't happen while the government is being held hostage. So we need to open up the government, and then we can move on with the business of the Senate. But regrettably today, like I said, we tried to get on something that used to be routine around here, and that's a defense appropriations bill, to fund our military, and they blocked even proceeding to the bill.
So let me go to the central argument, because as you know, this is about health care and the health care subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. And I think you would agree that the cost of health care is rising overall. So from your standpoint, is there a bipartisan approach that Congress can take over the long term to fix what is clearly one of the most expensive budget items families face today?
For sure, and there is, believe me, we want healthcare premiums to be lower, not higher, and healthcare to be more affordable, not less. And I think one of the challenges we have right now is the way some of these programs are designed. And you asked the specific question we're dealing with right now, where the Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credits, or what you call the COVID subsidies that were put in place by the Democrats just a few years ago. They set the expiration date. The reason we're dealing with this expiration date at the end of the year is because they put that in place. But that program, for example, is so inflationary. I mean, there isn't anything in there to contain costs. The payments are made directly from the government to the insurance companies. The insurance companies go out and automatically enroll people. There are zero premium policies. People don't even know they have coverage. And there's no income cap. I mean, you can now, some states, you can make $500,000-600,000 a year and be getting subsidies from the government to help cover your health care. So it's a program in desperate need of reform, and I think there's a path forward to be able to do that, but you can't do it while the government is shut down. And I think right now, the big question is going to be, will the Democrats open up the government so that we can actually address this health care issue before the end of the year, which is when the policies, the deadlines for the policies or for this program expire.
We're talking to the Senate Republican leader, John Thune, and let's talk about South Dakota and farmers in general, because clearly you've been putting pressure on the White House basically to reopen some of these farm loans, and I would imagine that tariffs also impacting the fall harvest and some of the overseas customers. So what are you hearing from farmers in your state and across the Midwest?
I tell you, Steve, that it is a big issue because we have a record crop in South Dakota this year, soybeans and corn. We're seeing record yields and nowhere to go with it, and it's a real challenge. And commodity prices have been depressed for some time now. Input costs can remain high. There are no margin in agriculture. Farmers are losing money now every year. And, of course, lenders are getting nervous. So, we need markets. We need demand for American agricultural products. And unfortunately, there's a lot of uncertainty around markets now, largely because of China. And the trade posturing with China right now, they have shut down for several months now buying any American soybeans. They're paying significantly more per bushel to buy them from Brazil or Argentina. And that's got to change. And so I've made it very clear to the administration, the president, his team, every time I talk to somebody, Department of Agriculture, U.S. Trade Rep, Department of Treasury, that any deals that they're striking on trade right now, ag's got to be front and center. They have got to get these markets opened up so that our farmers can make a living at the marketplace. Now, in the interim, the president's made it very clear that he wants to support our farmers, and so we're looking at some potential options to ensure that there's a safety net for them. And in fact, I suspect there will be some announcements made about that in the not too distant future.
But I'm curious, because if farmers are losing customers to China and other countries, does China come back once all of this comes to an end? Or long term, what impact does that have on the farmers, the crops, and the businesses that they hope to have overseas?
I think part of it is, yes, China needs to come back, but we have to assume, I think, for purposes of going forward, that we're going to have to open up other markets. And so I know that they are working very hard in other areas of Asia, South Korea, Japan. Some of the deals are striking there, some in Europe. There are other markets around the world where there are big populations who are big consumers of American agricultural products who currently aren't, perhaps buying because of trade disparities. And so I think what the administration is trying to do is create reciprocity with some of these countries, open those markets up, and I think that demand will build over time. But it doesn't, obviously, it's not an immediate solution. But I hope that when they start talking with China, which is upcoming here, that they will get the Chinese market at least opened up to agricultural products. I mean, it's the relationship with China economically and from a national security standpoint is fraught. We all understand that, but we have it is one of those relationships when it comes to agriculture where we need to be able to have a trading relationship, an economic relationship. They need us, we need them, and at some point, I think both countries are going to have to sit down at the table and figure that out.
So, Senator Thune, you have 52 Republican colleagues. You're navigating the White House, a lot of variables, congressional Democrats. How are you navigating all of this, especially during a shutdown?
There's nothing about this these days. as I said, these aren't normal times, and no, there's everything is harder than it should be. But we're trying to keep the trains moving here, and which is why, even though in the middle of a shutdown, I mean, last week we moved 107 executive branch nominees. We did 3 judges. Whereas I should say we did a circuit judge, we did the defense authorization bill, we did 3 Congressional Review Act resolutions of disapproval, repealing Biden area regulations. So there's, we're staying active, and this week, as I said, we try to get the defense appropriations bill up on the floor, which has now been blocked. We're trying to get the appropriations bills we've already passed into conference with the House, and so far they're blocking that too. So at least right now, it makes it very, very hard. But we're going to continue to try and legislate. And as best we can, work with folks on both sides of the aisle. There are things that we can do in a bipartisan way. One of them ought to be funding the government, and the appropriations process. Permitting reform is something. A farm bill. A lot of farm policy was included in the bill we passed in July, but there still are other features of the safety net that we need to address, and that's always been a bipartisan issue. I think there's going to be another big piece of crypto legislation, which I hope can be bipartisan. So there's a lot of stuff to do, Steve, and we're going to keep our heads down and continue to do the work, but hoping that soon the Democrats will give us the votes to open up the government.
So one final note, Senator, on the shutdown. Any plans for the principals, House and Senate Democrats and Republicans, the president to sit down and try to hammer something out?
Yeah, I think that happens after the government opens up. I think the president's more than willing, and we understand that as we think about the path forward. But I think right now it's hard to do that when you take a hostage like the federal government and try and force the other side to adopt a whole bunch of new policies, which include in this case $1.5 trillion in new spending. In exchange for keeping the government open. And, we're not demanding anything. This is the cleanest. This CR is so clean. It's short term. It's not partisan. Has no policy riders or partisan gimmicks on it. It's a straightforward bill to keep the government funded. And then I think we all sit down and figure out the path forward on some of these other issues.
And speaking of sitting down, President Trump sitting down with President Zelensky, and news that the president will meet with Vladimir Putin in Budapest, Hungary. Date is TBD, but you're calling on new sanctions against Russia. You want Congress to act. Specifically, what are you calling for?
Well, Lindsey Graham has a piece of legislation that's been around for a while, and we've been getting some. He's been refining it and getting input from the administration about how to make it most effective and how to implement it, and also to make sure that the Europeans follow suit. But I think he's going to be refiling that bill here soon, and I think that represents a great opportunity for us to weigh in support of Ukraine in that battle. And I think it strengthens the president's hand to know that that's coming as he has conversations with Putin. But I give the president and his team great credit for what they did in the Middle East. That was incredibly complicated, and obviously getting those hostages out was a huge victory. And I think that it's an opportunity to sort of build on that success. But I think it's important that the Russians know and the Ukrainians know that the American people, through their elected representatives in the Congress, have their back and want to support them in every way that we can. So we'll try and figure out a way to execute on getting the sanctions bill up and voted on, but it's got like 85 co-sponsors, so it should have broad bipartisan support. But then again, as I said before, these days around here, nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, one final question on this, and again, Senator John Thune, so appreciate your time. If sanctions are in place and there are Tomahawk missiles and all part of these negotiations, do you see an end in sight from your perspective in this war between Russia and Ukraine? We can only hope so, I suppose.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. There's just way too much bloodshed, and obviously, it's gone on for way too long. But I think if the Russians know, and particularly if the administration moves forward with some of these long-distance weapons like Tomahawk missiles, and it's clear to the Russians that economic sanctions or secondary sanctions are at some point going to kick in against them. I think those are all levers that the administration can use to try and get Russia to the table and to try and make a deal. And so we want to do whatever we can to be supportive of those efforts and to try and bring about peace in that conflict, which is, as I said, it's gone on for way too long and killed way too many people.
John Thune, the Senate Republican leader from South Dakota. Senator, as always, thank you for your time. Hope you'll get some rest along the way.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be with you. Talk to you soon.